Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to be here this morning with you. So I'm going to start talking about the future, where we're headed. So initially, if you look since the evolution of the modern human, 200,000 years ago approximately, until the year 1800, there was approximately 980 million people, so less than 1 billion. So we went in 200 years from a span of less than 1 billion people to about 7.5 billion. Well, this trend is expected to keep increasing, reaching about 10 billion people by the year 2050. And if you notice, countries and continents in Europe, the birth rate is going down, ages have stabilized, but the African continent is expected to keep going, thus reaching these expected goals as highlighted by the UN and so on. So the thing is, we have a tremendous increase in population, but at the same time, we have an exponential increase in technology. These technologies eventually will have substantial impact on jobs and improving jobs and what's the impact of people and so on. So if you look at the curve here, we expect in the year 2035 or so that the computational power will be approximate in power to one human brain. And if we keep going through that trend and extrapolating, we expect by 2060s approximately to have a computer power equivalent of all humanity at the same time. And that trend will keep going on and on and on. So you can start imagining what are the implications of these computational powers and the reduction in cost and the accessibility that a lot of people will have to it in the job environment. If you look at the 2025 example, the robotic industry by itself is going to be approximately $70 billion in market. And obviously that's going to keep increasing as well because it's becoming more popular and everywhere. But the thing is, robotics by itself is not going to do much help. It's the combination and the coupling of robotics with the artificial intelligence is going to cause the big issues here. So initially it's going to be a transition where more people are not going to be needed to do certain jobs. And we can see this, for example, of the mission control. We see a reduction in people as the technology keeps enhancing. We have less and less people manning these panels and these consoles. Well, the same thing with the job environments. We're going to have the computational capabilities will be able to aid people, requiring much less personnel to be able to do these jobs. But eventually, with the advancements in artificial intelligence and robotics, people actually expect they're going to have tremendous paradigm shifts in the global economies and job market. And this is a very controversial topic, by the way, because people argue both ways. They say, well, with every technology, there's always increase in jobs, which is exactly true. No question, it's true. The question is job displacement from these artificial intelligence robotic technologies going to surpass the job creations? And a lot of experts will tell you that it is going to be the case. We're talking about a complete paradigm shift. You know, something we've never seen before. Essentially, we're creating like a new species that will be almost competing with humans. So the thing is, we need to start looking at these trends and these technologies and start strategizing about the future. What is the future economy going to look like? What is the future job market? How can we start investing and seeing and strategizing about the future from today? If you look at the educational system, for example, compared to technology, if you look at the phone industry in the last 50 years, well, phones have come significant advancements since 50 years ago until now. But at the same time, if you look at education, if you look at the classroom, any classroom, and you look at the environment, it's not that much change, actually. It's a small classroom with a teacher teaching in front of you. Maybe we've added some complementary computer software, laptops, and so on. But the fundamentals remain the same. And I think in order to be able to adapt and move with the times, with this technological trends that are coming, we need to start with the educational system as well. And not only from personnel developing in the educational system, but also the research that we do. Sometimes we find that academia provides technologies, and then they look for a customer. And sometimes they have a lot of IP libraries that there's no use for it. So there should be a direct line of communication between academia, between industry. Make sure when a new technology is being developed, there's a perfect customer for it, and they're going to create a new industry line. So at NASA, for example, we just retired the space shuttle a few years ago, and basically the intention was to build a space station, which is the big lab that's going to enable us to go forward in the future. There is a lot of things that we don't understand about microgravity, radiation, environment, and so on. So that is the perfect platform to be able to understand and be able to adapt and learn what are the implications of the human body and so on to be able to go to deep space. So after we did that, we moved the space shuttle, we retired it, we built a space station, and we developed this new segment into the economy of commercial space. So now we have a new commercial space companies that will be going and servicing the low Earth orbit and creating new economies and new jobs that are estimated to be in the billions of dollars. And for us, there's several goals, going to the moon, going to Mars. Yesterday, the budget for NASA was signed, and the mission was to send humans to Mars by the 2030s. And obviously, that's a long challenge and very difficult, so it's going to require a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, a lot of partnerships with industries to make things happen. If you look at what NASA's and the government contribution, for example, the space and the airspace and the aeronautics, early on, NASA helped significantly develop the aviation industry, the controllers, the flight controllers, the communications, the aeronautics itself, and then that became part of industry, and companies like Boeing, Lockheed, and so on capitalized on that. And the aviation industry is about $2.73 trillion in GDP right now. The same thing with the commercial global space economy. It's about 330 billion, and it's going to increase substantially. And by the way, commercial space doesn't mean only sending rockets. So it could be involved in communication, it could be involved in electronics. There is a lot of segments that are part of that commercial global industry as well. So what are the next game-changing technologies that we're seeing going to be taking place, in addition to what we said before? Big data, for example, and the Internet of Things are things that are starting to take a lot of headway in what we see every day. Now, big data by itself doesn't mean anything. Big data, we have to develop algorithms and be able to transfer the big data into meaningful information that we can benefit and gain insight, so it can help us in what we do every day. In terms of driverless cars are going to also cause a huge paradigm shift in the way we do everything. And if you just look at that, actually that's one of the roundtables we're going to be discussing this afternoon. But I'll just hit specifically on the job markets that might be impacted by the driverless cars. So on average, households have 2 or 3 cars. And with the development of driverless cars, it's expected to go significantly down. So the job market and the needs for cars will be substantially down because one car will be able to do the job of several at once. If you look at the insurance companies, we'll be able to insure less companies, so there'll be some impact there. Oil and gas, it's a big portion of oil and gas revenues is from the enormous consumption we have in the automotive industry and transportation. That will be reduced as well. Maintenance industries, and so on and so on. Miniaturization is also having huge impacts in developing new markets, new economies. Look, for example, in 1956, just 5 megabytes. See how large that thing was. And right now, it's keep growing smaller, cheaper, and more accessible. Now the thing is, with this, it's starting to create markets like the CubeSats, the macro CubeSats that we're launching into space. And before, launching satellites used to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's too expensive, and they're supposed to last for decades or more. And the problem is, with the technology increasing at such an exponential rate, the technology that you're sending today might be out of business in 2 or 3 years. So by developing these new CubeSats, typically they last much less, about maybe a year or less than that. But the thing is, they're so cheap, and you keep replenishing them with new ones that contain the latest state-of-the-art technology. So you're maintaining the best of the best as we go forward. And all of stuff, it's so many applications of miniaturization in medical field, and transportation, and oil and gas, and so many economies. Augmented reality and virtual reality is also starting to have a lot of impact in tourism and medical. We use it, for example, in space station. We're looking into having astronauts wear specific goggles that when they're doing training, they need to do maintenance, everything is displayed on them, helping them, guiding them by ground control and so on. In the medical field, it could be used also when doing surgeries, and some experts can be looking exactly at what you're looking at and give you guidance and advice. In terms of virtual reality, it's becoming so real, it's amazing. You can look, for example, at Instead of going traveling and going to tourism, potentially in the future it will be going through a virtual reality environment and give you the same pleasures and meaning as going on vacation. It's definitely an area that's kind of changing significantly and making a lot of impacts. Autonomous flying vehicles. Now, all these sectors that I'm talking about, we know they're going to be mainstream in the future. Now, the key is how do you develop services that align with these technologies and these new economies and sectors that are coming up? That's going to be the key, because 3D manufacturing, for example, it's impacting in every single thing that we do every day. For space, it doesn't make sense, for example, to go to Mars or go to a different planet and bring with you so many spares, parts, and which is weight prohibitive and so on. So all we do is just upload the file, we print everything, and we're looking into even in situ resources from the planets we're working on. For example, if you go to Mars, we're trying to look into the regolith that we use from the sand of Mars as a feedstock for creating these 3D models and parts and so on. Also, in terms of sensitive equipment, the launch environment is very severe launch environment. And it requires a lot of packing and sensitivities, and some components don't make it into orbit. But if you can manufacture the simplest and the more intrigued and sensitive antennas, for example, printed on space, that will create much more efficient communication systems and hardware that we need. Even it's impacting the medical field, impacting talking about the food industry, even the clothing industry. In the future, people expect that you'll be downloading a file of a clothing garment. I'll be printing it at your house and so on. Obviously, everything will be tied by cybersecurity. Without having a solid, safe network, none of these things that we just talked about will be possible. So cybersecurity is expected to be a big driver as well as we go along in the future. Now let's talk about disruptive innovations. There's substantial examples, but I'll just briefly touch on a couple of those. ZARA, anybody familiar with ZARA, the company ZARA? Okay, so when the company started, people said it's impossible, it's not going to make an impact, it's a very competitive environment, and it's very difficult to get into it. So what they did different is they looked at the model completely in a different fashion. They created a sense of scarcity. And also, the time to market typically takes about a year from the time people start designing until actually it goes into the stores. It's about approximately roughly 1 year. With ZARA, it takes about 2 weeks from the design until it reaches the shelves. Now, what they did special is, if you go to any store, the company manufactures very limited number of garments, and they send it to each of the stores. And whenever these things are finished, that's it, they don't manufacture anymore. But also something interesting that they do is, as you move forward and they're selling these garments, they collect feedback from the customers coming to buy these things. And they collect all these feedbacks and they send it to headquarters. So headquarters look at the feedback and it is trends, indicating that actually people have a need or are interested in specific styles. 2 weeks later, that specific thing will be in stores. And again, only limited quantity and so on. So it's becoming very successful. I think they have over 2,000 stores across the world right now. Same thing with Netflix. So Netflix is a perfect example of changing the model as you're evolving in technology. So they came at the perfect time when there was actually a need in the market. There was a problem with the fees, with Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. People were getting sick of paying so much late fees, but they couldn't do much until the DVDs came in, and then we were able to ship them at a much less cost and much efficient networks. So they developed an efficient way of sending DVDs that takes much less time and reaching customers. And they developed also something, a subscription model. As opposed to paying one by one, you pay monthly, and you have a subscription model. Obviously, they went and tried to sell themselves to Blockbuster, and they didn't see the vision, and we all know what happens to Blockbuster. But the thing is, they didn't stop there. So with innovation, you can't stop. If you stop, somebody else will come and take over your place. You have to keep advancing, even if you're successful. So what they did after that, after the technology became sufficiently advanced, and the streaming technology was capable of achieving what these people's goals were, so we started creating the streaming industry, and they were leading at it. Very small fee, amazing content, and becoming very successful. But again, they weren't satisfied. The market is always changing. So what they did now they went from a video store to content producer. And as a matter of fact, I think they even won an Oscar for some of the productions that they have. So that tells you that to be successful, you need to keep adapting and changing. Even if you're doing good, you always need to be looking forward. Look at the smartphones, how many industries it has disturbed. Who carries the GPS in the car anymore? You can GPS, camera, radio, music, the gaming industries, and so on and so on. Medical applications. It's just one single technology can disrupt so many industries. And the key is you keep looking up and seeing what's going on. And if you notice, a lot of these technologies, disrupting technologies, start actually small. It starts in some people's garage. So the key is companies, big companies, should actually be aware what's being presented in the market and have engagement with venture capitalists, because venture capitalists typically know a lot of what's going on because people approach them to get the funds. So it helps a lot if there's engagement, big corporations, to see what's going on, what technologies, what's the potential to create new economies or disrupt the specific industry that's currently available. And that will be very, very helpful. Now, in terms of creativity, people think, are people created, are born creative, or is it something that you learn? And I can tell you it's probably both. It's not obviously some people are more creative than others, but also creativity and innovation is something you learn by taking classes, by engaging and working with people that are creative and innovative, and it makes a substantial difference. It made, in my case, I was improved the way of creativity by taking some classes and certificates and so on. So definitely it's something that people can augment and become significantly more creative at what they do. Let me give you a couple of examples of how thinking out of the box can solve problems. There is a city that we're having a lot of problems with posters by bands and performances and so on. And they tried finding them and did so many things, and none of that stuff worked. So eventually somebody from the city said, what if we go to these posters and we put a stamp saying that the concert has been canceled or date change? And they started the program along these lines, and eventually it had so much impact that the problem almost became reduced. So it solved the problem by just creating this very simple thing like that. Speeding ticket is a small city in Europe actually created a new speeding program. They were having a lot of issues with speeding cars in a small neighborhood. So what they did is they created new ideas that they said, okay, let's reward the people that don't speed and penalize the people that speed. So what they did is they created a program where 70% of the profits from the speeding tickets go to the city and 30% goes to the people that did not speed. So the speeding cameras captured all the plates from all the cars, and whoever went speeding, they put in a pool and they got some revenue from all the collection that we're getting. And guess what? That was substantially solved the problem by doing something very small and very creative, like doing that stuff here. Let's switch gears to biomimicry and innovation. So there is a lot of innovation that's actually being derived from nature. And I can tell you hundreds of examples, but I'm just going to touch on two small ones. So during a trip to Japan a few years ago, I went to a lotus farm. And I noticed that the water never sticks to the leaves. It's always keep going back and forth. And I was talking to a professor there that went with me on that trip, and they said actually they're working on understanding the structure of these leaves and transporting the technology into the leads of the yogurt cans. If you notice, there's a lot of yogurt typically gets stuck when you're moving the lead of that. So by doing that, they solve a big problem with something derived from nature. So there's solutions everywhere. Like I said, there's so many examples, but this is just a simple one. Also, if you look at some of the wind turbines, underwater ocean turbines, they notice that some whales, they have, the fins are rich, like the shape that I'm showing here in the monitor. And they notice by having this shape, they reduce the drag significantly and create more efficient outlines. So they mimicked what happened with the whales, and they developed these new fans that go underwater, and they were able to get significantly more output with much less drag and more efficient. Let's talk about cross-industry innovation. Cross-industry is something that you derive from working with different industries, and we'll talk a little bit more as we go along with that as well. So in Africa, they were noticing that the incubators for newborns, whenever they run out of spare parts, they were getting just put apart and put storage, and nobody was using it because it was so difficult to get spare parts for these components. So a bunch of designers and business people said, okay, how can we develop incubators that actually are derived from parts that are accessible to anybody in the country? So they noticed that one of the Toyota cars is the four-wheel drive was one of the most popular cars in that specific country. So they developed a new incubator that was essentially based on parts from that car. So whenever a spare part goes bad, you go to the car and you get the component and replace it, and it was able to have significant impacts. To give you an example of something completely unrelated in terms of how cross-industry works. So this guy, he's a guy from Argentina, and he's a mechanic, he's a car mechanic. And one day they were having a party at their house for dinner, and they noticed that the cork, when they were opening a bottle of wine, went inside instead of going out. So they started saying, okay, who can get the cork without breaking the bottle? They started messing with it. And this guy specifically was able to put a plastic bag and kind of inflate it and get the cork out without any problems. So then again, he kept thinking about it, and he talked to some gynecologist that he knew. He said, how can this idea be used in the medical field? Well, guess what? They developed a system to be used in the poor countries where actually you can aid the doctors in getting the babies out. And it was able to save thousands of people's lives by doing something very, very simple. Let's talk about combining innovation. This is the simplest way of creating innovation, where you have two products and you want to create a product that actually combines both of them. And that's also something that people think about. You remember the car, the bags? Nobody has a bag like this anymore. Everybody has cards. But not only that, yesterday I was in the airport and I noticed one of these bags, they have a paddle that you put down and it becomes like a skateboard. So I see people zooming by me going fast, and I looked at it. It's one of these bags with a gadget that actually you can stand on it and go fast as well. So it's amazing how things keep adapting, and creativity creates new products. Obviously the smartwatch and the smartphones and so on. The Coca-Cola, the tin and the can, and then how you develop something that actually combines both of them. And then if you live in New York, you have the cronut, which is a new creation that's supposed to be very good. All right, so let's talk about open innovation. So that is something that we're actually having a lot of success at NASA. You'll be surprised, actually, most of the solutions that come from open innovation are from completely divergent industries, nothing to do with you. But it's people, which is an advantage, because sometimes when you're involved in your industry, you've been there all your life, that's all you know. Your mind becomes so narrow-minded that it's very difficult for you to think outside of the box. So by doing open innovation and involving people from the outside, they'll be able to give you a completely different perspective and different look at what you do. So let me give you an example from the Harvard Medical School, for example. They tried to solve a megablast algorithm for nucleotide sequence alignment. So they spent about several years, and it cost them about $2 million to do the sequencing. So that resulted in about 72% accuracy, and it took about 4.3 hours to solve. So then they said, okay, how can we improve that? So they hired 2 postdocs for 1 year. They paid about $120,000, and they were successful. They were able to reduce it to 77%, improve the accuracy to 77%, and reduce the amount of time to 47 minutes. So they said, okay, let's take it one step forward and see how can we even make it better. So they did to top coder community, put on the open market for open innovation. And what they were able to do is actually create a solution that was 80% accurate. Only took 16 seconds to solve, and the cost was $6,000. And if you notice here, by the way, all these are successful solutions that's still better than the baseline. But it tells you that the power of open innovation nowadays that's having a substantial impact on every single industry. Design thinking is also something very important. A lot of people are using in Silicon Valley, Google and Apple use. Basically, it's a human-centered approach to design, create new design and solve problems. Engineers typically and designers, when they come up with a new solution or a new idea, it's what they think it's going to be working for the customers. So what design thinking is, it puts significant emphasis on the customer itself. So it puts yourself in the customers and what's the needs, and there is a process composed of 5 different elements. And then you have a specific way of doing brainstorming and prototyping and so on. Even prototyping, by the way, there is a lot of psychology in creating a prototype to get feedback. If I create, for example, if I spend a few months creating a prototype that's made from metal, for example, 3D printed parts and so on, and I come and ask you for feedback, you're going to be nice to me. You're not going to tell me, because you know how much time I spent in creating this prototype. You're going to be kind of hesitant to give me your honest feedback. You might not give me the whole full story. But if I give you a prototype made from maybe cardboard or scratch in a paper, you'll be more honest, and you'll be able to give me more substantial feedback compared to the other one. So even in a small thing like providing prototype and feedback, there's a lot of psychology that goes behind it as well. Let me give you some of the perspectives that I had working the last 20 years and so on in terms of innovation and so on. So there is two types of innovation. There is revolutionary and there is evolutionary. So evolutionary is when you have a product, for example, let's talk about a car. You have a car that goes 50 miles a gallon, and you're trying to create a car that goes 75 miles a gallon. So that's an improvement, it's evolution. But we're talking about revolutionary innovation is how can the car goes 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles with 50 with one single gallon. And for that, you have to go to the drawing board, start all over, and it's a completely different way of thinking of things. And we call that also moonshot thinking, which is from the Apollo program. When we launched the Apollo program, it was thought as impossible, but eventually it happened, and that's kind of the thing that aligned with innovation. When it comes to innovation is very risky. Ideas are there, but I think if you talk to most people doing innovation, most innovation departments, they'll tell you about 95% of the ideas fail. But they also tell you about 2 to 3% that are successful. They have a game-changing implications on the industry that they have. And it's very, very helpful. And that is why you keep seeing people investing heavily in innovation, even though it's very high failure rate, the success will have huge impacts in making them successful. If you look at your employees in general, so you'll find farmers and you'll find hunters. So farmers are people that just want to do their own job, want to work from 8 to 5. They don't want to outreach, go outside of the box, just keep doing what they're doing. And you see that the hunters are very difficult to restrain. They're always going outside, coming up with ideas, but they never close the deal. They never finish it up. So what you need to do is create a balance between the hunters and the farmers. And by doing that, you'll have a good system going on, flowing. Not only you're creating new ideas, you're bringing new perspectives from the outside, but you have people that will take it and follow up into productive means. When we see that also actually all the time in meetings, when we're having discussions and products, you have to, when you're talking to teams, you have to make sure that people feel it's everybody's idea. It's not your idea and people are working on your idea. If you do that, you're not going to have all the passion that people are going to give you because of that. So you have to make people feel that this is a collective idea all of us are working on as a team to make that thing happen. And that will have substantial impact in what we're trying to do. In ideation, like we said, so the key is creating a multidisciplinary team, different cultures, different teams, different ages, different backgrounds, different disciplines. And also, when you do that, I mean, you'll be amazed at the solutions and that you'll be able to get out of that. But also when you get answers, when people start brainstorming, the key with brainstorming ideas is to create quantity versus quality. Don't judge it initially. If people are coming up with new ideas and you keep shutting them down, they will stop contributing and they will retreat. And also you have to make sure that you keep doing yes and. I like your idea and we can do that. They said, I like it, but what about this, what about that? So the yes and is very, very essential in creating the flow of ideas into the ideation. We hear failure is not an option a lot, and people use it as a motto, but in fact, actually failure is an option, and failure is actually encouraged. It's very, very important that you fail to understand what you're working on. Now, there's a difference between failing in an environment in a lab and when having people, for example, on space shuttle or rocket going to space, failing, that's completely unacceptable. That is not an option. But before you get there, it's totally an option, and the more you fail, the more you will learn, and it's encouraged. Actually, there are companies that actually they award the person with the highest failure, and they make a program out of it. So there's definitely some value in doing that. We hear sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and that is probably one of the biggest killers to innovation. We run every single day with that. And if that was the case, then we'll still be riding horses to work. We know horses, was nothing wrong with them. We'll be doing that. And the key is keep going. Like I said, no matter what you do, there's always going to be a better way to do it, more efficient. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be more accessible. And you need to keep moving forward. And that is unfortunately not an easy thing to do, because people are set in their minds sometimes, and they've been doing it for decades or so, and it will be very, very difficult to shift. It's not impossible. It takes an effort, but definitely it's something to look into. So benchmarking outside of the industry, in the last few years, we looked at, okay, what are the gaps, what challenges that we need to do the next phase of deep space exploration. So what we did is we looked at these gaps and saw what industries outside of the aerospace have similar needs, similar technology challenges like us. So we reached, for example, to the oil and gas industry. Oil and gas work in remote environment, extreme environments, sometimes difficult to get to. It's very safety conscious industry. And by working with them, we're able to develop so many synergistic projects between both of us that were very successful. So we used less resources, we got new ideas, and we were able to do it in much, much faster time. So there is substantial benefit. I'll talk one more chart about how to do that as well. Taking risk is also important, but you have to be measured risk. Don't be careless when you do risk. Because without risk, you're not going to go anywhere. If you're going to create a space system that's going to go to space with zero risk, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be on the ground. You're always going to take risk, but the thing is you try to minimize it as much as possible within reason. One time they asked the CEO of BMW, why did he decide to invest in electric cars? And he said, it's because doing nothing is the biggest risk. People actually will go into this market, and if we don't get into it right now, we'll be left behind. I talked to an executive from Toyota a few months ago at a conference we had this summer, and that was a very interesting quote that he said. He said, if executives say this will be success, it will probably fail. If the majority disagree, that's a good sign. And he was referring to the Prius. So the Prius, apparently, they had significant resistance from the executives, and they didn't see the value in having that car launched in the market. But after it launched, it became actually one of the most successful products that Toyota has launched. And my colleague from Toyota probably will elaborate a little bit more on that. Unfortunately, when things go down in terms of budget, one of the first things people do is cut innovation, research and development, all these things. And that is the biggest mistake you can do. Because when things are down, this is going to be the future. This is going to be what's going to give you a competitive edge compared to everybody else. If you start cutting that, then you're cutting your future lines. And successful companies, actually, it will be shown that people, even in tough times, they still were able to put money and support innovation, creativity, and research and development, and made them much, much more competitive in the market. Google, I go to, we do a lot of visits with Google, we benchmark back and forth. But what the executives believe there is you cannot force an environment, you cannot force innovation, but you can create an environment in which innovation is allowed to happen. And everything, since you walk to the door at any of the buildings at Google, everything is designed in such a way, the buildings, the way people interact with each other, the governance models, everything is designed in such a way that encourages creativity and innovation. You become creative just by going there, by seeing that environment. And that is something definitely several companies have to be looking into, how to make the environment more creative, how can we increase the productivity and so on. Now, where does innovation stop? I've seen it where people actually, executives push innovation, say, well, we'd like to do that, these are the metrics for next few years, and nothing happens. And then you see a lot of people, new employees coming up with these amazing ideas, and they get shut down again. The bottom line is it's always gets shut down in the middle management. And how can we do that? I believe executives should put performance evaluation guidelines saying you are supposed to create certain things that are creative and innovative. Because if you are innovative, you're always going to take risk, and people don't like to take risk in general, right? So people like to do whatever they're doing, and it becomes very resistant to going out of the norms of what they do. So by the executives forcing people in the middle management to comply and be a part of their performance, I think it will have substantial impact in what you're trying to do. The environment also for innovation, let me tell you an example. A few months ago, we were in a meeting in one of the companies discussing some collaborations. And the meeting itself, it was kind of cold, we weren't going anywhere, it was very boring. But suddenly we went outside to take a break, and it's one of these companies that they have their own kitchens, cappuccino machines, it's one of these, again, creative environments. And we went there, and I can tell you it was 100% different conversation. It became totally different. We started coming up with ideas, started flowing, what about this, what about that, why did we do this? I said, man, it's like, what a difference from just 15 minutes ago to here. And that tells you the impact of the environment where you're having on the discussion that you're doing, on creating new ideas and being creative. Now, the thing that I keep emphasizing on people, when you think about the future and try to strategize about the future, don't think about our capabilities today. Because if you do that, you won't be able to predict and be able to be successful in what you're trying to reach in the future and strategize. Because the thing is, you need to start look at what's latest research papers, what is the patents, what is venture capitalists investing in, and all these things won't tell you exactly where we're headed, but they give you some more guidelines, will give you some more data points. And with all that stuff, you'll actually be able to go and say, okay, I think based on everything that I'm seeing, these technology will be mainstream in the next 10, the next 15 years. So what can we do? I need to investing from today. So when these technologies become mainstream, guess who? I'm going to be one of the most world-leading experts at it because I invested early on and I put capabilities to enable these things to happen. That's something that we've been using a lot also lately. Team and joint resources, like I said, academia, government labs, industries, various industries. And believe me, there's always things that you have in common. I can give you a big list of things that can be that way. And so imagine if everybody's successful in what they do. People are very successful, by the way, in the projects that they do and what they create and so on. But imagine if you did collective effort and collectively you were able to do the thing that you were able to do by creating synergies and collaborations with people completely outside of your industry, by the way. It will be endless limitations the way you will have that. So with that, I would like to end my talk and open up for any questions you guys have. Thanks for the attention.